Hi, Abhilash. Welcome to Add Wings to Your Career program. Thank you so much for accepting my invite, and I'm glad to have you around. I've gone through your profile, and there's a lot of background check that I do before I could pick up somebody. You seem to be like somebody who's planning to revolutionize supply chain, and that's how the name correct supply chain skillers. It's a great deal to be in a forum or in a platform and then try making that change to it. It requires a lot of skill and guts to take it up. Thank you so much for making that arena a better place for everybody to live. So here we go. So I'll leave the forum to you, and
Thank
then
you.
talk to us a little about yourself, and then we will move ahead.
First of all, thank you so much, Arif. This is an amazing initial connect that we had, and thank you so much for having me on your show. Really, really honored,
You're
and
welcome.
I'm sure that this will be a great start of a collaboration. So, looking forward to
A-
more such.
Absolutely. So, Abhilash, what do you do in your day-to-day life? How does your day go by? And what exactly happens in supply chain, correct? Because that's the dilemma that a lot of things are there. People don't understand that this is one of the critical pieces to live day-to-day life, but they don't seem to relate to it because everything happens behind the scenes. So if you can talk to us a little about it, then everybody will make the understanding of what exactly it is.
Sure, absolutely, and I'm glad that you asked this question because um, there are so many different jargons that go around, right? And we tend to make simple things overcomplicated. And supply chain is one of them, right?
Okay.
Uh, so if someone asks me what supply chain is, it's basically applied common sense, right? You call, and I'm not inviting myself over, but if you call me for dinner, what would you do to prepare for me coming over? Is a supply chain, right?
Wow.
So what would you want to know? You'd want to know whether I'm vegetarian or non-vegetarian. You'd want to know what are my preferences. Do I have allergies? Uh, do I like soft drinks or do I like juices? And so on and so forth. And then you would then create a menu. Then you'll figure out how much of that menu to make that menu. What raw materials do you need? What ingredients you need? You would want to know which of those ingredients do you have with you and which you have to buy from the market, right?
Hmm.
And the ones that you want to buy from the market, you go out and buy from the market, right? Some of those items you would already have in stock, like rice, dal, you would have stock of it, right? But the other things like saffron, I hope that you would put saffron in the biryani, especially if you're inviting me in, right?
Yeah, you're an
That
Hyderabadi. How will you forget biryani? Go ahead.
absolutely, 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 and that's exactly what supply chain is all about. Knowing for an end result, what are the parts, what are the different parts of the chain that lead to that end result. So the classic supply chain is defined as a set of processes, ecosystems, technologies, and people that work in tandem
Hmm.
to get to bring value from a start point to the customer. So it's basically a value chain that you are actually creating. Now, if I say this, it sounds very technical, right? But really, our our mothers were maybe the best supply chain managers around.
Wow.
So it's really applied common sense.
Amazing. Thanks for putting that in the simple words. Now, because you already talked about Hyderabadi, so I would want to understand, what is your street food? What do you
Oh,
eat? Yeah.
I binge. I'm a foodie. Well, I mean, before I became a supply chain guy, I was a hotel management uh, chap. So
Wow.
that's my education background. So yeah, I binge on street food. Practically lived off it for the longest time. So the most favorite street food, if I can have tons of it, is halim. So
Wow.
especially in the first, and again, being a fellow Hyderabadi, I stayed for the first year in Hyderabad uh, in a place called Shalibanda in the old
Uh-huh.
city. It's very close to Charminar. And on the route to my office pickup, uh, there's this really famous place called Pista House. So that used to be our haunt. right? So it's not quite well. Even in 2001, it was not street food. Street food is still a fairly big name, but that was what I used to really go wild about. So there you have it.
Excellent, correct. No, this video is not sponsored by Pista House though. So, but we'll
I
talk
sh-
a little
yeah,
about it.
I should have mentioned that. Yes,
Yeah.
I should have
So the,
mentioned that.
the 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 good aspect of looking at all those aspects, correct? Being an Hyderabadi, having Halim, having biryani, that comes very naturally, correct? Irani chai and all of it, and you seem to be like all into it. Thank you so much for specifying. And then if you live in Shalibanda, you didn't have a Pista House biryani, that is impossible.
Yeah,
So you're supposed to have, and that by nature comes to you, correct? Thank you
correct.
so much for specifying little details on your personal life. How did Hyderabad has no? I haven't never heard about supply chain in Hyderabad, and you are the first guy that I've met who talked about supply chain to me. So what is? How did that end up with you, and how did you get into it?
Well, I mean, totally by accident. In fact, well, as I said, my education background is in hotel management, and I wanted to kind of be in the front office. But right at the end of my 3 year diploma in hotel management, you had these mock interviews going, right? So I went for all the mock interviews, and for some reason, no, it was not clicking, right? And I was very lucky to have very honest feedback coming from my group. And one of the things was that everyone advised me to take up housekeeping, or because everyone knew I didn't have a talent for the kitchen or to serve. So housekeeping was a safe place that everyone asked me to kind of get into, and I didn't want to because I couldn't make my own bed. I didn't want to kind of end up making beds in hotels for others and make a really lousy job of it. So and I wanted front office. And then one day I actually looked at the mirror and really saw myself, and then I understood why front office and me don't go well, right? You need to have a certain charisma, you need to look a certain part, uh, and right at the same time. And to cut a long story short, in 2000 in 2001 I finished my diploma. 1998, we had a series of uh, nuclear tests that India had conducted. So for the next 5 years, India was under an international embargo in terms of you know,
Oh yeah.
people were not traveling to India. There were no tourists coming to India. So the tourism industry in India had taken a big setback at that time. So people were not forget getting jobs in the industry. People were losing their jobs, right?
Oh God.
And that was also the time where this absolutely unknown new area had come into the country. A company that was known only for making bulbs, had started off something, and the first time someone said the word call center, I had zero clue what it was. So we had this interview, came in. For some crazy reason, they felt that all of us guys from hotel management background have a certain sense of certain level of customer centricity built in. So
Mhm.
we got hired by the truckloads, and I was among them. Now, when we came in, I was expecting to do something that is related to what I was trained to do, something that is customer centered. The first job I got was to enter orders, and these were production orders. Now, I had zero idea what production is. I'm talking about factory line production. Zero idea. I had no idea of what orders are really. Why am I even entering these orders? So that was the first foray into supply chain. Now, slowly, I started understanding it, and it started kind of growing on me. It's grown on me for 21 years now.
Wow.
So that's how it all started.
Wow, that's an interesting story to talk about, correct? So ideally, you ended up in call center, and from there, that's how you landed up with supply chain. Then you talked about GE, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I
I didn't.
know.
Again, I was careful that again this is not sponsored by GE, so I
I'm
didn't
sure.
give the name. But yeah,
So
it
I
was
think I think the same company is in our DNA as well. That's why I was able to connect with you so faster.
Oh
Probably
yes,
just the
I
culture
remember
and
that.
yeah. And
I
probably
remember
just
that being.
the yeah, so just the culture and all that just was able to make faster connect with you. And absolutely, you fit into any front desk if you wanted to go today. So everything is flawless for you. So I want to understand, correct, in the supply chain material, uh, there's this office setup, and there is this
Mhm.
automatically when there's an office setup, there's office politics that happens. So
Absolutely.
anything that you've gone through, anything you can share your experiences from your personal life. How did you deal with it? What happened? And I'm sure a lot of things will go confidential, but you can still talk to
Yeah,
us
yeah,
about.
absolutely. Well, I mean, office politics is a reality, right? I mean, I keep on, I make this comment a lot of times that if there is more than one person in a room, there is politics, right? Just that,
Amazing.
right? Because, and in a lot of times, you play politics even with yourself. You try and convince yourself that you are either very good at something or very bad at something. And you try to convince yourself for the longest time till you kind of outgrow it. So I believe the whole point, and especially office politics, it comes out of, in my opinion, purely my opinion, comes out of two places. One, uh, an ambition, and that ambition being driven at belittling others rather than elevating oneself, right?
Hmm.
So you can play with your ambition in both ways, right? You can either make yourself so good that you stand head and shoulders above, or you can make the others look uh, lesser than you. So it could come from that, or it could come from a deep rooted sense of inferiority complex.
Oh God.
So these are the two areas that I believe office politics comes from. And the inferiority complex bit is the same thing that the bully mentality comes on, right? I mean, uh, I have a deep rooted fear of something. I do not want the world to know it, so I cover it up by being brash. I cover it up by making everyone else look bad. Now, how do you deal with it? So there are, again, I have seen a lot of my colleagues fall victim to it,
Hmm.
because the whole idea is, if you recognize, there are a bunch of people who recognize that there is politics happening and they are the victim, right? And there are the others who do not know it. So if you're not, blissfully unaware and you continue with your life, chances are you may get hurt because of that, right? So in my head, it's always important to know politics. You need to be in the game. You at least need to know the game that's being. You may choose not to be the player, but you definitely need to know the game. The other thing is, if you are the victim or if you are being the victim, you do not want to, uh, be engaged in that game. The only and the best way, according to me, that you can, kill any kind of a political attack on you is to actually be head and shoulders above the rest. You just
Wow.
have to elevate yourself, because and this is something that I guess a lot of people also talk about, right? That there is no competition at the top. The competition always, so in your hierarchy, right? Again, a G philosophy, right? When you actually draw out your entire roster of people, you'd have a good 10% who would be absolutely at the bottom of the rung of the ladder, right? They are the people who would need help, who would need support to climb up. There would be another, about 70% or 75% maybe, who would be the in-betweeners, right? And there is a top 10 to 15%. Again, the bottom and the top are roughly the same, right? Or 10 to 15%, which are a cut above, right? There is never politics at the top and the bottom, because there's no point in playing politics in the bottom. Okay, absolutely. They are axing their own feet. So there is no need to kill them. The top, you can't reach there. The politics always happens in the 70%,
Wow.
in the mid 70%. Now, the idea is simple: get out of the 70%.
Crazy. These are like mind blowing events, correct? You opened my mind with saying that you play politics with yourself as well. And if there is anybody who is, if there are two people in at a place, then there's a politics is supposed to happen. I think those are the mind blowing sessions. correct questions and the way you responded. The other beautiful thing that I will add to it is show up the courage.
Yeah,
Stand up and show your courage of dealing with stuff. Don't run away, confront it, but ensure you don't put anything which is not value add, which is lower than your cadre in you.
absolutely,
Correct, correct,
absolutely.
because there is an ethics that you live by. You are not supposed to cross that and go under that, irrespective of anybody opposite to you does whatever. So you have your ethics, maintain that, because once you put that thing in you, understand you're degrading yourself and none other than that. Correct.
And
So
it is so
just
brilliant. It is so brilliant the way you have elaborated it. Because to actually rise to the top 10, you have to do exactly all of that thing, right? You have to
yes,
have that courage. You have to do things that others will not do. You have to stick your ground and stay within your ethical limits. You'll have it's not just performance, right? It is you as a package. So as you
package.
rightly said, I really appreciated the way you actually broke it down into three or four. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, gives a lot of clarity to that high level thought as to how that can actually be done. And I completely agree with what you said. Right. So,
Thank you
couldn't
so
have
much.
said it
Now,
better myself.
with all this around career, how do you plan your career is another good question that generally comes my way. So what is your take on that one?
Well, I see. I mean, I'd be. So you know my background anyways, right? So had you not known it, I would have actually started like when I was a little child, I used to look up at the sky, in flight, and I wanted to
Or
go into supply chain, and it would have looked believable. But you know my background, right? I came here by chance, so it was not a planned career shift for me. So I may not be the right person to answer this, but from the time I got into supply chain, then I started planning my career. Yes, I did, and that's what I can talk about. So um, the first thing that I'd like to talk about, I'll go one step back now. The best time to start planning your career is when you really start figuring out what your strengths are, and that typically happens when you are in the 11th standard. Because in your 10th standard, you're too focused on your board exams,
Mhm.
right? You are not looking at the world beyond that. In the 12th standard, again, you are focused on the board exams and clearing and getting marks. 11th is a sandwich year. That's, in my head, the best time for a person to actually reflect and take stock of what am I good at and where do I really want to go. I may not be clear what is the profession I want to pursue, but where do I want a general direction of where I want to. And uh, you know that if a young lady or young man at that
Mhm.
age gets that guidance to kind of start thinking in those lines, we will have far lesser number of people like me who started out on middle management and came into supply chain. You might see more of the people who would align themselves to where they want to get. Having said that, how do you plan your career once you're in it? It's a very simple case of looking at, first of all, figuring out where do you want to get your career. Because even in, so you and I, right, it's a good example because both of us, the basic, major connect area is that we both started our career with the same organization,
Yeah.
right? And we got to know it by chance, absolutely, just
Yes.
because we had a conversation before this interview,
Yeah.
right? So uh, but look at this, right? My path was so different from yours. You have done excellent in the core business of of customer service and then growing in there, and you have a complete team and you have been doing it so well. My entire line of business changed. So what I want to say is, within the same organization, within the same setup, you have so many different areas of growth. The first thing to understand is, what are the areas of growth?
Hmm.
The problem that I see, and typically this is only because we have, it's not just our culture as Indians, but it is across board. We look up to
Uh-huh.
someone, right?
Hmm.
And chances are we look up to the person that we have the most touch time or contact time with, and which typically happens to be our managers, right? Now, if if you only look up to them, not really have a good, meaningful conversation about what they need to do to get or climb up the ladder, chances are you'll idolize and you'll try to copy what they are doing, right? And
Agreed.
that is why there is so many of the people. You take any team, 80%, and I bet my 21 years of career experience, a good 70 to 80% of them would want to become team leaders. That's their next goal, right? And once they're team leaders, they would want to become managers. Now, how would you have 70% of your team promoted as team leaders and managers? And on the side, there is quality. There is, quality, Six Sigma, all of that in one word. Training. There are so many different avenues that are absolutely left out. Finally, who goes in there? One, people who are clear, they want to get in there. It's an easy entry because there is hardly a
Yeah.
competition, right? The other set of people who get in there are the
Mhm.
ones who could not make it through this,
Yeah.
funnel of being team leaders. And so it's like their second, third, fourth choice that they're settling with. Now, if you take these people who are made through the funnel, a good majority, a good proportion of them, I'll not say majority, a good proportion of them might actually be interested and would do better in these other roles because they have the inherent skill sets for this. Now, and that is where uh, it requires someone who can show them the path. See, I was very lucky to have very good leaders, right? And I'll quote one of my leaders without taking his name. So he asked in a complete set. So he had taken all the managers who reported into him. He was a VP at that time. He had taken us out and very informally had a
Hmm.
chat. And
Hmm.
he just asked a question. So what is leadership, right? And we all gave our answers and stuff like that. And then he asked, what is common about the, and it is, by the way, nothing to do with any specific, faith, but
Yeah.
the leaders of every faith, right? One thing that is common across them, right? All the three or four was that they were all shepherds. They were all shepherds, right?
Amazing. Yeah.
And his point was the role of a leader is to be a shepherd because sheep can only see 15 feet ahead. The role of a leader is to stand the high ground, see where the danger lay and where it is safe and lead them the right path. So part of it is having the right guide. And I'll not say that that guide is always your manager, not necessarily. It is a mentor. So one
Yes.
of the key things that is needed is to have someone who has that long-term visibility, who knows you and knows the path, and can tell you that for a person like you, I think this is the right path, and that is important.
Abs- Absolutely agreed. Correct. I don't know why people, underestimate the value of having a mentor for them. The the other thing is sometimes they look at managers, sometimes they look at everything within the organization. But if you are within the organization selecting somebody, understand the direction is within the organization. But if you pick up somebody outside, probably you will get a broader prospect and then look at the other aspects of it. Correct. So
Correct.
people needs to have a mentor, look at mentors around and then see, what adds value and all that. Correct. While we are doing a lot of these talks, correct, I would want to talk about a little in terms of, how do you manage time? There's so much happening. What is that we do to manage time? Because there's so much, correct? There's mentor that we spoke about. There is politicking. There's everything that's happening. How do you manage time?
See, managing time is about prioritizing. I'll actually, okay. I've had a lifelong improving trend of being able to manage my time. Right. I started off being extremely bad at it. To today, I'm able to manage it fairly well. But even today, there are learnings, right? So I'll bring the newest thing that I learned. So of late, I read this book called Essentialism, right?
Okay.
And that book, in a way, turned my entire understanding of time management on its head. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is very simple. You have limited time, you will not be able to reach everywhere. So time
Uh-huh.
management, start with, is to say no to the
Okay.
things that don't matter. I guess that was the underlying learning that I learned out of it. Because I am naturally a person who would typically say yes if I can do it and stretch myself to do it. But the whole point, the lesson was so hard hitting that the idea of time management is to say no to things that do not matter. And what doesn't matter is what doesn't add value. It has to add value to something.
It's a mind-blowing thing, correct? If it is not adding value, I'll say no to it and I'll save my time because my time is precious, correct? The other thing to look at is what is important to you. If it is important, then
Yeah,
make time for it. If it is
exactly.
not, let it go
Exactly.
and don't think too much about it. Okay. Sure. We talked about a lot of other stuff, correct? I would want to know a little more about your, supply chain skillets. What is
Sure.
your plan for the industry?
Well, so you asked me earlier, about supply chain a little bit, right? And I gave you that analogy. So I have been in supply chain for close to 20 odd years now. And again, supply chain is also one of those areas that there is so much of complexity. And that complexity is not, I told you right in the beginning that it's applied common sense. So how can it be complex? Because of the scope, because of the size, because of the magnitude at which it works, things can go wrong. The reason why supply chain is so sought after, right? So just to give you an example, we all know that there's a global shortage of or global delay in automobile supply nowadays. If you
Yeah.
look at why is that happening now, so anyone who has actually ordered and paid for a Maruti Brezza, the new one that got delayed by so many months, or any of these other, I'm not only talking about one car, but multiple cars, multiple stables. The reason is something that none of these manufacturers could help or avoid: global shortage of semiconductor chips. Now, that is purely because of a supply issue. Now, one small chip, and because of which, look at the delay that a vehicle can actually get into, right? The same thing, what was about $120, $130 pre-COVID, I'm talking about the price of a marine container
Mhm.
for renting a marine container for an overseas shipment, anywhere between maybe $200, $250. That's what I remember, right? That has gone up all the way to around 1100, $1,200.
Wow.
Primarily because there is a global shortage in certain, so there is a stockpiling at certain places. They can't move it out. The rest of the world is short on this thing. So whoever has it is able to kind of command really crazy amounts of money. So the that's the complexity, right, of supply chain. But if you look at it, if you just bring that to the most basic level, it is commonsensical, right? I mean, when you don't have something, the prices are going to go up. It's economics, right?
Mhm.
But when it happens at such a massive scale, it impacts economy, and that is why supply chain is so much in demand. Now,
Wow.
what are my plans? You can either, so first of all, there are very few organizations that do a formal training, formal learning in supply chain. And even if someone does a formal course in supply chain, because a lot of courses like BCom and MCom have a small portion which deals with global supply chain. Then your engineering has some part of supply
Mhm.
chain from a more technical perspective, etc., etc. But no one actually goes in and you know trains a person for being a supply chain person, right?
Oh God.
And that's an area that I really wanted to get. And supply chain is not one thing, right? It is planning for what to planning. It is buying the right material, so sourcing, buying, procurement. It includes the actual manufacturing production line plan, the raw material
Mhm.
plan, the production plan, actual production control. Then moving on to the delivery of the goods, it then goes into return material. So the Amazons of the world would tell you that about 40% globally they have returns, and especially in India. I'm not talking global because global may be lesser than this, but India has more than 40% returns
Oh
of
God.
material. So material return is also that bigger an area. And underpinning all of this, there is the entire layer of technology, master data management, transformation, and everything, right? So it's a massive, massive area. And surprisingly, no one has actually taken this and put it into a one single post. There are global organizations that actually offer you certifications in this. But the problem is, it is very theoretical. And
Hmm.
I went through one of these certifications. I was able to do it, but I also know that that was not the best way that I would have loved to learn. So
Okay.
what I started doing is I've always liked learning by doing things. Right?
Hmm.
Uh, so I said, okay, why don't we kind of make make it something, make it a way to train our associates in a way that they can
Hmm.
actually learn without feeling like they are learning, right?
Okay.
And we tried it out. It became a big success, and that's what I think I would want to do. And that's how this entire uh, ambition has grown, that I'd like to train graduates, fresh graduates, people who are in a job but still not sure whether they want to kind of make a career in that, who have heard about supply chain, are curious about it and want to know more. I'd like to give them a platform where they can actually learn about supply chain
Hmm.
through games, through
Wow.
supply chain games, right? Not theory, but practical gamification of supply chain learning. That's what I want to
Crazy
do.
that is correct. That's crazy, correct? Because it's such a dry subject, and on the top of it, if you make it gamifying and all that, I think that's going to take full forward. I think thank you so much for taking up that as a moment or movement, and driving it through. Thank you so much, Abhilash, for coming into my show and then trying to talk about a lot of nitty gritties and all of it, and all the best for your career and your movement. So, and last departing words that you have for my audience that you want to talk about and leave them with a good thought.
Um, you know, before I leave, I just wanted to kind of again thank you for bringing me in, and I really really love the passion with which you had, the first conversation you had actually spoken about how you want to kind of make a difference in so many lives. I wish you all the very best in that. And one quick message to all your audience is that anyone who's listening to this, it's it's a wonderful, wonderful platform that I have personally found that I would want to kind of be part of as well, in some small way. And I'd encourage anyone who's listening in to know more about it. Be curious, because that's the only way that we'll learn and grow as a young country who has got so much of potential ahead of us.
I would love, for you to talk about the country and all that, correct, Abhilash, and thank you so much for that privilege about passion. I'm really committed on this one, correct, where we have this young blood that is in the system, and sometimes few of them are sulking because they are not getting enough opportunity, or they just lack of mindset and all that, and I would want to contribute to them in terms of putting the right input and right perspective for their careers to flourish. It could be any domain, correct? It could be supply chain, it could be regular operations, it could be regular IT or whatever, but the structure, everything remain the same, everything lies here. And if you try making that change happen, I think we will have a flourishing India with so many professionals reaching to their potential and ensuring the Indian economy thrives to a next level, correct? So thank you so much for being around, and take
Thank you
care
so
everybody.
much.
Yeah, and see you again. Bye bye. Take care.